Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to break down how to start a short-term rental business, specifically using the arbitrage model, in one of the most unlikely and, believe it or not, most profitable markets in the entire United States, Alaska.
So, when you picture a top-tier Airbnb location, what pops into your head? You're probably thinking Florida beaches, California sunshine, right? Places where the tourist season just never really ends. It's a totally common assumption.
But what if I told you that some of the most explosive returns are found in a place that's literally defined by ice and some pretty extreme seasons? Yeah, you might want to think again.
I mean, get this. That is not a typo. Imagine making almost all of your yearly income in just about 4 months. This is the reality for savvy operators up in Alaska, where this super compressed, high-demand tourist season creates an absolutely incredible financial opportunity.
So what's really behind this? How is this even possible? Well, it's kind of like a perfect storm of tourism, geography, and frankly, a lack of infrastructure that creates what we're calling Alaska's unlikely gold rush for short-term rentals. It all starts with this number. We're talking a projected 3.1 million visitors flooding the state in 2024. That's a record. And here's the kicker. Nearly all of them are going to show up within this really tight 5-month window, basically between May and September.
So you have this intense concentration of tourists, and it just creates a classic supply and demand problem. There simply aren't enough places for all these people to stay. I mean, cities like Fairbanks and Juneau have a structural shortage of hotel rooms. They literally can't accommodate the millions of travelers. So short-term rentals? They're not just some nice-to-have option. They're an absolute necessity that fills a huge, critical gap.
Okay, so we've covered the why. The theory makes sense. But let's move past that and look at the hard data. We're about to break down the actual revenue you can expect and a massive financial advantage that a lot of people overlook. Just take a look at these numbers. The peak season average daily rates, your ADRs, are impressive across the board. In Anchorage, you're looking at up to $350 a night. But check out Juneau. With all that cruise ship traffic, a well-placed property can command up to $500 a night. That could pull in $70,000 a year, and remember, most of that is happening in just one season. And right here, this is the secret weapon for Alaska hosts. Alaska is one of the very few states with no state income tax. On top of that, it also has no statewide lodging tax. What does that mean for you? It means your net margins are way higher than they would be almost anywhere else. You just get to keep more of every single dollar you earn.
Now, the taxes you do have to think about are all at the local level. Anchorage is the highest at 12%, while Fairbanks is a bit lower at 8%. These are really the main taxes you'll be collecting, and you absolutely have to factor them into your financial plans.
Okay, we've seen the why and the what, so now let's build this out into an actual plan. This is your practical, step-by-step playbook for actually getting started in this unique market. All right, so this is your roadmap. Now, I really want to focus on 2 points here that are just so uniquely Alaskan. First, preparing for the challenges. We're not just talking about a high heating bill. We're talking about budgeting for real costs, like professional snow removal, and having a solid plan for when the temperature hits 40 below. And second, building that local team. You absolutely 100% cannot manage an Alaskan property from far away without a reliable cleaner and a handyman on speed dial. Seriously, they are your business's lifeline when things inevitably go wrong. Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. You know how it is. High rewards always come with real risks and real rules. Operating in Alaska means you have to navigate a very specific set of regulations and prepare for dangers you just won't find in the lower 48. And wow, the regulatory landscape varies widely. Fairbanks is famously operator-friendly. You just need a standard business license. Anchorage has a pretty straightforward registration process. But then there's Juneau. It's the most profitable market, but it's also the most complex. It requires a conditional use permit, which means the city and maybe even your potential neighbors have to approve your business before you can even open your doors.
And then you have the risks. Your business plan has to account for this stuff. Frozen pipes aren't just a possibility, they're pretty much an inevitability if you're not prepared. Alaska is the most seismically active state in the country, so earthquake insurance is a must. And yes, you actually have to think about property damage from bears and moose. These aren't just funny quirks, they are real operational costs you have to plan for.
Okay, so this brings us to a really crucial question. With all these unique risks and a high barrier to entry, how can you possibly tap into this market without the massive capital it takes to actually buy a property there?
Well, the answer lies in a specific business model, rental arbitrage. This is how you can leverage Alaska's really unique market dynamics to your advantage, capitalizing on that huge gap between long-term rent and short-term rental revenue.
For anyone who's not familiar, rental arbitrage is actually pretty simple in concept. You sign a normal long-term lease on a property, and then, with the landlord's written permission, you furnish it and list it on platforms like Airbnb. The goal is to make more in nightly revenue than what you pay in monthly rent.
Let's look at a real-world example to make it super clear. In Anchorage, you might find a decent 2-bedroom apartment and sign a lease for around $1,800 a month. Okay? That's your main fixed cost.
Now, during those peak summer months, that exact same property, rented out at those high-end nightly rates we saw earlier, could bring in up to $5,000 in revenue. The difference between those two numbers? That's your gross profit. This is the arbitrage opportunity in action.
But here is the catch, and this is probably the single most important part of this entire strategy. Making arbitrage work in Alaska all comes down to what you do in the off-season. The most successful people either pivot to midterm rentals for traveling nurses or state workers, or they build a financial model where those massive summer profits are big enough to cover the lean winter months. Your winter plan is just as important as your summer one.
Which leaves us with the final question. In a market that's all about extremes, extreme seasonality, extreme weather, and extreme revenue potential, is the risk worth the truly extraordinary reward? Because ultimately, being successful here isn't about luck. It's about meticulous planning for both the summer gold rush and the quiet winter freeze.